there's one article to read. There's some videos for you to choose from to look at. And sometimes there's one step more. There's a template, a PBL template that I invite you to get your copy now so that you can start to populate it as we move forward. So that's all there. And I will be referring back to this at the end of this session. So let's get to this important piece about modeling PBL, which is about participation, not just, sitting and listening, because if we do that with our students, then our students think we're playing a game called school. And in the game called school, oftentimes for students, it's about being passive participants, waiting until the teacher, tells you to do something. In this case, we're going to engage with each other in this exploration. And so this first question, what is the value of students having a voice in their learning? I want you to think about that. We're going to take about 10 seconds just to reflect on that question. And then after 10 seconds, what I'd like you to do is post in the chat box your answer. So with that in mind, I want to begin with norms. So the norms are not rules, but they're the professional behaviors that can support our learning together. And so norms are really important for students to create. In our case, because we're doing 1-hour webinars, I've created this for us, but we can look at this and think about if we can agree to support this. Everyone contributing deepens everyone's learning. There's a wealth of experience that you have. I'm not the only educator in this session, so you bring a lot of experience and expertise just about student engagement. And I want you to feel free to use the chat as a back channel to share your thoughts and ideas and your questions about project-based learning, or just about good instructional practices that support student voice. And Nurlan and I will collaborate on addressing some of those and bringing those into the conversation. Pay attention to self and others as we do this time period. There might be really like questions you have immediately. You just need to know the answer. Please feel free to post those. And listen intently with the one host self. Just not just listen to me, but listen to what is in the chat. As people are trying to answer each other's questions or share their ideas, maybe you have a thought of a response to a question that's been asked. And of course, the last norm is ask questions. So if we can all agree to these norms, this is what we're going to be using for this webinar and the entire series. Now I'm going to pause here for a moment because I want you to think about norms in general, because norms are very powerful when students, so if you go back to your classroom or even virtually, and you work with your students, is to have them establish what are those norms, those observable behaviors that supports everyone's learning. And then because each student comes to this idea of how to work with others in a classroom or even virtually, where they're working through a computer, they have different ways of approaching that. And those different ways may not always be supportive of a group. So having them come together and establish what those norms are is very powerful. Something like 3 to 5 statements that describe what professional behavior looks like. And students can come up with those because they have worked with groups or teams where teams were effective, where they're in a group that's very effective together. They can identify what those norms are. So if you don't establish norms with students, norms exist already. Remember, every student, every person, even now, all of you have your own compass for how you participate in a webinar or a classroom. Hopefully all of you have no other distractions. You're focusing on this, and you're not multitasking on your screens, looking at emails or reading news or doing some other work while we're doing this webinar. But if that's happening, then this is why we have these norms, because if we're multitasking, how can we listen intently with one's host self? How can we pay attention to ourselves and others who are participating? How can we contribute to each other's learning about this topic, and how can we ask questions? So that's the power of norms. And so just a little bit about myself. I'm John McCarthy, and I've been in education now for a little bit over 30 years. And I've been involved with project-based learning, differentiation are two of my passions. You can see this is an older picture of my two kids who are now college age. They went to a PBL high school. So I not only have I taught project-based learning, have I worked with schools implementation, but I'm also a parent of two children who went through a PBL school. So I've gotten to see those different perspectives, those different ways of looking at how project-based learning happens. And hopefully that's going to help answer questions that you may have. And, I've also had the pleasure and honor to come out to Astana and work with teachers on project-based learning. So it'll be great to hear your thoughts and perspectives about in your classroom so we can ensure that this works well for your students. So, let's start with every project begins with an entry event, which is something we'll break down what entry events are tomorrow. But I want you to think about this question. Why should we prepare students for jobs that do not yet exist? You may have heard that question before, but we think about your students when they graduate and they go to a post-secondary experience, whether it's university, it's a training place, or it's right into the workforce. Often this is the question we want to be thinking about, because in this global economy, there is so much happening and changing rapidly that it's really important that our students are prepared for that. But here's the thing, that's the wrong question to ask. That's not really the question we want to be looking at. I say most jobs will be replaced by robots and machines. And let's assume that does happen. We have Isaac Asimov's world of robots taking over most of the work. There will still be other kinds of work that evolve. And that's why we want to think about this as the question. Why should we prepare students to create jobs that do not yet exist? So rather than having them prepare them to wait for a job to be created, let's help them learn how to be the entrepreneurs who come up with the ideas, come up with the ways of having work available that is so good that they have to hire other people to be involved. And it's not necessarily that, we say, oh my gosh, is that realistic? Is that possible that we could prepare every student to be the job creators? Well, what's realistic is we can prepare them with the skills to do that. And then they can apply those skills, whether they are creating the jobs or if they are going into the job workforce and become, leaders of their work. So we're going to look a little more deeply into that piece. And just, periodically you'll see at the bottom of the screen, you'll see a website. And that website's my company website. And that particular link you see there takes you to my PBL section. So there are additional resources there for you to explore that I may reference in this webinar, or it may not be in the resource page that I showed you before. But this is where you can get it all. Everything is right there. So in the US, there's this organization called NACE. It's the National Association of Colleges and Employers. And what they do is every year they survey their membership about what are the skills that they would like to see incoming students who are incoming to university, as well as incoming new employees. Now, this is from the US, but I do think that from the conversations I've had with business people, community members across the world, the answers are fairly similar. This is what people are looking for. So take a moment, look at this list and ask yourself what resonates. What are two here that really pop out? You think, wow, yes, that is really important for our students to have when they are going into university and if they're going into the job workforce. Let me give you a moment to take a look. And I'd like you to post what two stood out to you. So let's take 10 seconds to look through.
Let me just try to translate the list to those who do not speak English. Так, ну, список умений у нас сверху вниз я иду, да, давайте. Первое – это умение решать задачи или проблемы. Второе – у нас умение работать в команде. Третье – это умение, как это перевести-то? Умение работать. Субординация, да? Потом аналитические умения. Дальше умение излагать свои мысли письменно. Лидерство. Умение излагать мысли словесно, устно. Так, быть инициативным, быть скрупулезным, да, здесь detail-oriented, то есть ориентирован на детали такой, дотошный. Технические умения. Flexibility – это гибкость, умение меняться, умение адаптироваться под изменения, то, о чем мы только что писали в чате. Interpersonal skills – это у нас, как это перевести-то? Interpersonal skills. Умение находить общий язык с людьми. Computer skills, понятно, это умение, навыки ICT, навыки компьютера, компьютерные навыки. Ужас, у меня уже язык пытается. Умение организовывать, organizational ability. Strategic planning skills – это стратегическое планирование. Дальше у нас идет friendly, outgoing personality, это у нас дружелюбие. Entrepreneurial skills – это навыки предпринимательства. Tactfulness – это, как это называется-то у нас? Tactfulness. Быть вежливым.
Being polite how you say things.
Yeah. Just, ну, да, быть вежливым почти что. Creativity – креативность. Fluency in foreign language – это вот знание, хорошее знание языка. Так. What?
Yeah.
It took me quite a long time to translate.
No, that's okay. It's important everyone has that. So here's the thing. I mean, when you look at this, it's an amazing list because, like I said, every year they do this survey. And when you look at especially the top 10, they pretty much don't change. They might change one slot. So, for example, ability to work in teams a year ago was number 1, and now it's number 2.
I was expecting creativity to be at the top.
Yeah, it's surprising that it's not there, but it's still valued. It's something. Sometimes it's looked at in different ways. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I don't see innovation because sometimes innovation is another way of looking at creativity. I would say that problem solving is the core towards creativity. So it's just different ways of looking at this. But the key thing is you'll notice that there's really not much when it comes to academic skills. That they're not looking for how well people can read or computationally do math or do science, but they expect that already. They know that as teachers you're already doing that. What they want to see is how are those academic skills being applied and used through these contexts, these lenses. And so this is what leads to student agency or student voice, the ability for students to lead their own learning and to make their own decisions. We look at this is kind of like the left-hand side you see is that top of the list, the key ideas, concepts that businesses and colleges, universities are looking for. This is what they want. And on the right-hand side are still additional ones that I just pulled out from that list that are just as important to have. So creativity might seem low on the scale, it's still an important piece. When we want students and employees to think outside the box, then that is really in part creativity. It's also entrepreneurial skills, being a risk taker. These are very valued in the world beyond school, and it's so important for us to teach this because I have to tell you, I work with schools all over the country and all over the world in different countries, and there are schools in different countries, including Kazakhstan, where this is worked on. where students are getting these skill sets, which means any school that's working on these skill sets with their students are giving their students an edge over everybody else. So if your school is not working on this, it's important to really think about how you might pick 2 to 4 of these from this list and really start to develop those, because otherwise your students will fall behind those who will know how to use these quite well by the time they leave your school. So take a moment to look at this picture. And you don't have to post in the chat, although you can if you want to, but just think about, what does this picture look like? What's going on here? What's the event? And so, a lot of times people will say, oh, well, this is some type of sporting event, or it's some type of religious event happening, or it's a concert. And then eventually someone looks closer and they say, hey, wait, does this look like esports? And if you don't know what esports is where, just like football, only it's with computer games, where professional players play esports, like League of Legends or Dota, games like that, which are computer games, and they compete against each other. They're paid, and they compete for world championships. So like right now, League of Legends is in the middle of their tournaments, their regional tournaments that are going to lead to the international tournament for League of Legends to see who will be the world champion. And this is like a screenshot of a League of Legends game. So literally a computer game that people are making money playing. But they're not just making money playing. That means that they have coaches, they have nutritionists, they have a business department. There's a lot going on. And I share this with you because, esports is projected from this chart by next year to be over $1.5 billion industry. I have to tell you, as of the beginning of this year, it was already exceeding $1 billion and moving up. And so what that means is, from the revenue, the advertisement, is that there's a lot of money, which means there are a lot of job opportunities. Again, not just for playing games, but think about traditional sports like football. You don't just have a coach and players. I mean, like I mentioned the nutritionists. You have statisticians. You have administrative assistants or secretaries. You have a business department. You have an HR department. You have all of those traditional and non-traditional jobs around that sport. Well, it's also true with esports. What's interesting, though, with esports is I've had a chance I've read some interviews and I've gotten to talk to some publishers of these games. And what they're saying is pretty consistent. And that is, when someone is hired, or when someone applies for a job in, say, Riot was interviewed about this. That's the publisher of League of Legends. What they said was, if you are not a gamer, if you don't show that you play games, they won't even look at your application because they feel you don't understand gamer culture. So, this is a whole wide avenue that we can develop those skills that we saw on the NACE list so that students can navigate this. Because again, there's just so many related job opportunities. And we look at, now this says STEAM, but also applies to STEM, of different jobs that can come across. So for example, if you see production for stage production, that seems kind of strange. Why would stage production be there for a STEAM or STEM? Well, it's because if you go back to that arena that I showed you, someone's got to produce that whole thing. The lighting, the structures, the settings, all of that comes from theater. But then also you see the business, accounting, HR, marketing, social media. All of these are going to be part of those games. And just keep in mind that much of these games, as far as being a moneymaker, did not exist 10 years ago. I mean, they're that young when you think about this. Yes, they do provide scholarships on games. Very good point. I can speak about in the U.S. As last year there was over $15 million in scholarships for games, and it's expected to increase exponentially as we move forward. Maybe you've seen this site. This is called Twitch. Twitch is a site where you can literally watch people play games live. It's all live streaming. So you can watch professional games for free, like League of Legends. You can watch a lot of what's happening in the different regions. But you can also watch individuals who have their own account, who are just playing their game of choice, and people watch them. And people can subscribe to their channel. And as a result, through those subscriptions, there are a lot of people who are making a living just by streaming their game of choice and people watching them play. And from looking at Twitch, this is some of the numbers from what I just showed you. And what I want to emphasize here is that every month over 4.6 million streams are happening. Think about that. Every month there are 4.6 million unique streams happening. Each stream is a person who is online, live streaming the game they're playing, or live streaming a professional match. So that's a lot that's out there, and from that, there's revenues, there's ad revenues. So again, where there's money, there's opportunities to hire other people to help. This is an example from 2015, and this is from YouTube. These are all YouTubers, and to be in this article, they had to make at least $2.5 million that year, USD. All of them made that money pretty much through YouTube, just by having their own channel. So, for example, the young lady in the far right, the red hair, Lindsay Sterling, she helped launch her music career. She plays a violin and she plays pop music with that. The young woman in the middle gives makeup tips. The two gentlemen up to the top left do comedy. And they all made $2.5 million or more in that 1 year. In 2018, these are three people who made over 10 million USD in 1 year. And if you look at the little man in the top right-hand corner, you may have seen him, or if you have kids, they may have known about him, because he's the one who got famous by initially just like opening up presents, and that's all he did on YouTube. And in 2018, he made over $11 million. So through predominantly his YouTube channel, he's had other endorsements as well as a result of that. But the point about that is that you have students who aspire to be the next YouTuber, who want to be successful and use that. And as they do, they're going to be able to hire other people to help them with their video editing, their production, their marketing, things like that. And that just opens up more jobs for more people. So this is why we want to prepare students to be the job creators, for jobs that don't yet exist. And this is what project-based learning does, because it reinforces those key skills we saw in NACE, such as we think of like the 4 C's, the collaboration, communication, critical thinking, and creativity. And if, this is a way to help students. The idea is that we want students to be active learners, but to be active learners, we have to get them active. PBL is a structure that's exclusively about having active learning, where the teacher is going to lead some of the work, and then they're going to allow the other work. They're going to define the sandbox and allow students to lead the work. And those are things that are really important. So I throw a lot of ideas to you. I want you to just reflect on what's one idea that you just explored that interests you the most, that you want to explore more about. And then, take 10 seconds to reflect on that, and then I'd like you to go ahead and post in the chat box.
By the way, last year's esports runner-ups were from Kazakhstan.
Oh, which sport?
Counter-Strike. and they won $150,000 US. They were very famous. I mean, they're more famous outside of Kazakhstan.
Yeah, Counter-Strike is a very popular game worldwide. Okay, well, because I have some more to share with you. I want you to go ahead and post when you're ready, and we'll kind of incorporate as we go along. So let's talk about what Pbl is and what it's not, because there's a lot of perceptions about what project-based learning is all about, in part because as students, we've all probably experienced projects, and then we've done projects as teachers. And so I'll say there is a lot of stuff out there that's dessert projects, which we don't have time to do. And so we want to distinguish between the two. So starting off with, this is what Pbl is not. And let's look at each of these more closely. It's not about not having curriculum. Yeah, we're just going to do this project and we're not going to worry about assessing what students know and understand, be able to do around curriculum. It absolutely begins with your curriculum. So you're going to look at your units of instruction, the lessons that you teach, the big ideas and concepts that are important for students to know, and that's going to be wrapped into the curriculum, into the project. And it's not about front-loading content. One of the biggest mistakes teachers make is they'll come up with a really great idea for a project, and they'll say, well, I can't start it yet because I've got these skills I got to teach first. Because if they don't know the skills, they can't do the project. As soon as you know what skills you want to teach and when you want to teach it, you want to start the project there. Because otherwise, let's say it takes you 2 weeks to teach the skills and concepts, then what the students will say 2 weeks later, they'll be like, oh, this is the project. This is why we spent those 2 weeks learning those skills. Well, if you told us that 2 weeks ago, we might have paid more attention. So you start the project before teaching the skills, because it gives students a context for why they're learning and helps them make connections to what they're learning academically to the world beyond school. And it's not about test prep. It's the thing about projects. Project-based learning will help students develop a deep understanding of concepts and retain that understanding beyond the test, any test you do. So that's helpful for test prep. But test prep is a whole different approach. Test prep is really about the art of teaching how to take a test. And so that might be something you do separately. But project-based learning is really about the building deep understanding of content and skills that can support students later on when you do assessments. And it's not about the teacher being the center who's running it in a way of they're teaching all the content, they're doing all the discussions, and they're the center of that. Remember, if we want students to have student voice, then they need to be the center of all our decisions. That's not to say there aren't times that teachers are lecturing. Lectures is part of project-based learning. It's just not the focus point of what Pbl is about. So we want to keep this in mind when we're thinking about project-based learning and what it's not. But let's talk about what it is, because anytime you see this in the project, this is why we call it dessert project, which might taste really good, but it's empty in calories, empty in standards or understanding, and that's not what we want to do. We want to avoid these types of projects. So in order to do project-based learning in the way that we need to do it is we want it to be the main course, the meal that has all the sustenance, the energy and good calories that are necessary. So when we look at this, the first thing is that it is about the curriculum. So anytime you plan a project, the first thing you do is you look at your curriculum, you say, what are the skills and concepts that students have to know and understand and be able to use? Because that's going to be the focal point of your Pbl unit. It is about building, then you build those content skills through Pbl. So again, we're not front loading. Can we still do direct instruction? Can we still do student practices? Absolutely. But also we're going to do this within the context of the theme and focus of the Pbl unit. So for example, there was a project where 5th graders were studying about cells. And the way they learned about cells was that they were also trying to understand what was cancer, what was the impact of cancer economically, socially, and physically, because they're going to try to do a fundraiser in the community, and the money would go towards cancer research. And they had a children's hospital, they had a cancer ward in their neighborhood. So all that to study cancer or to learn cells, healthy cells, and the function of cells through this building understanding of cancer. It built that real world connection for them to apply the skills within that concept. And, their PBL is the beginning of your unit, it's the middle, it's the end. So in the beginning, we want those different options. We want students to see that there's different pathways. There's not the one answer in most cases, especially to the full project. And then as they explore and they take different pathways, it may seem like a maze at first. It may seem confusing to kids at the beginning, but as they learn and they build their understanding of the curriculum, that they find their way out of the maze. They find the paths, and they find it might be more than one path until they get to the final end where they are producing something for their target audience. And it is all about assessments. So you're going to be using assessments not just at the end of your unit, but during the unit, throughout. If your project is 3 weeks, every week you should have at least 1 or 2 assessments where you're checking progress of your students. Just like you do in a traditional quality unit, you would be checking frequently to track their growth. Now, by the end, the final assessment should be something that where students are publishing their findings for their audience. And that might be a video, might be a presentation, it might be an essay, and it could also be paired with a traditional test as well. So you could do both. You don't have to eliminate the traditional test. The traditional test can be there. We just want to make sure that they have other ways to show their understanding as well. And it's so much about students having a voice in what they're doing. So whether it might be as simple as giving them choices that they can choose from, to eventually letting them propose their own choices, where you tell them this is what the curriculum skills they have to demonstrate, and then let them decide what that product or performance will look like that will address those skills. So there's a variety of ways that we can approach this. So those are the the ideas about what PBL is. And what I want to do is, we call this the main meal for project-based learning, and that's what we want to be focused, not desserts. And so what I'd like to do is, what's an idea about what Pbl is that you want to spend more time on? So let me bring this list back up for you. So when you look at this list, what part of this list is most attractive to you to spend more time on for your future projects? And when you're ready, post in the chat box. Okay, see someone likes 2, building content skills through PBL. That's huge. I mean, and another way of looking at that is authentic learning experiences, which we're going to get into in tomorrow's session. How we focus on our units through the lens of how can students use those skills in the professional world, and then build the focus around that. Yep, student voice is huge, absolutely huge. It's one of the most, if not the most important part. It's equally important with the curriculum standards that we are aligning those together.
Could you repeat the question? That someone is asking you to repeat the question.
The question, yes. From this list, which one stands out the most to you as an area you would spend more time in? Spend more time doing? Okay. So, yeah, assessment is, really important. And sometimes the challenge with projects is people get so focused on the activities, they forget that along the journey, we need to assess how students are doing. And there should be a lot of formative assessments that inform us of their progress. We may not necessarily grade all of them, and in our Thursday session, we're going to talk about assessments. So that'll be sneak preview. That's when we're going to spend time looking at assessments and projects. Yes, criteria, assessment criteria is so important. And again, we're going to talk about that on Thursday. All right, good. I love the participation, the answers. I mean, the conversation that you're having, because you can see you can drive some of the direction we go based upon your questions and comments. And that's what we want to do for our students, to engage them in that process. So let's couple things. If you're looking for ideas for projects, this particular link will take you to a project library where there are different sites that are listed there that host PBL units that you can look at to see if you find any ideas you like that you want to use or adapt within for your students. You see here what's listed in the box are what we call the 6 elements of project-based learning. These elements we're going to explore very deeply tomorrow. And when you go to this link right here, what you're going to find is there's going to be a reading assignment you have in preparation for tomorrow. That reading assignment talks about the 6 elements. So I encourage you to go check that out. But also there are some videos. So if you're looking to see examples of what projects can look like, PBL, and the way I'm describing it can look like, go there and just pick and choose some of the videos and see what you think. So as we are wrapping up, and again, just a reminder, in the bottom of the screen, you'll see that, if you're looking for jumping ahead and just getting like more resources about project-based learning, authentic learning experiences, that blue link at the bottom will take you to that. So if you have any questions at this point, here's an opportunity to ask those questions. Otherwise, you can always email me or tweet me. But we also have tomorrow. Come back tomorrow and we're going to get into the components of starting a PBL unit. What are those actual components? All right. So I'd like to thank you guys for your time.
Thank you, John. We've got a couple of questions in the Q&A tab.
Okay.
I'll just try and read them out to you. So one question is a bit more general. What kind of methods do you use in your teaching?
What kind of methods do I use?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, there's so many. I would put it this way: that every decision I make when I put together a presentation or I teach a grad class currently is I put the students at the center. I think, okay, what can they do with this? How can they demonstrate this or explore this without necessarily having me be the one who's putting all the effort during our interactions? Because the planning is where teachers put all the effort, as they should, but once you involve students, you want the students to do the heavy lifting. So I use a lot of, so one area I'll share is I use a lot of protocols, and protocols are ways to empower students with a structure for how you want them to explore content or have conversations. And so like on my website, excuse me, oops, sorry, didn't mean to do that. I have a whole section on, which supports project-based learning, whole section on collaboration. It looks like for some reason right now it's going slow. So I'm gonna try to bring it up this way. Oh, there we go. I can at least get the link. So let me drop this into our chat, and that might be a place for you to start.
Okay.
What other questions?
There is one great question. What are the limitations or disadvantages of PBL?
So, I'll put it into context. There are a lot of great PBL elements that can be used in a traditional lesson. So, for example, I was like, I don't want to do a project but I want to take some of the best ideas from PBL and use that in my traditional lessons. You could do that there, and we're going to get into, we'll start that process tomorrow when we look at authentic learning, and we're going to look at assessment, we're going to look at management, we're going to look at driving questions. All of these can be incorporated individually into a traditional lesson and elevate the lessons. Where PBL becomes problematic is when we do the things that what PBL is not. So let me just go back here to that list. That's what it is that when any of these things happen, I've seen examples where like one time there was a 5th grade teacher who's going to spend, 4th grade, was going to spend 5 weeks on a project on inventions and inventors. And the idea sounded really good, except that she told me she was not going to, she didn't expect them to demonstrate any skills. She just needed a break, and she thought they needed a break from the curriculum. So that's why she was doing it. Well, that's a waste of time. There's teachers who will say they're doing a project, but then they do all the front loading of the skills before they start the project. And so the students never really get to experience the learning the skills, which is the whole point of project-based learning. And then they do this dessert thing at the end. So this is a place to avoid. And then one other thing is like they'll call the project, but it's pretty much the teacher doing lecturing and directing the entire thing, telling students what to do, when to do it. And the end result is not a real world connection. It's just, it's just a traditional unit in the sheep's clothing of PBL. So it's not real PBL. That's when it goes bad, because when students see that, oh, this is nothing different. This is just what we normally do. You're just pretending it's something different. And then they pretty much tune out at that point.
Okay. This is a bit long, the question, but I'll still read it out to you. So my colleague says here, according to the literature, there are 4 types of PBL. Learning through action, learning on site, case-based learning, and challenge-based learning. So which one of these do you use, and to which age category, like with what grades?
Yeah. So the short answer is all 4 of those can work. Think of a car. You when you go and you shop for a car, how it looks on the outside, every car is different, right? It just looks different. You have a sports car, you might have a full-size car, SUV, you might get a truck. There's all kinds of cars that all serve the same purpose. They get you from one place to another. But then there's other things that make them different. And that's going to be the engine and the internal system. So, does the engine have the right type of pickup? Does the drive, is it 4-wheel drive or front drive or rear drive? Because that's going to affect you depending upon the conditions. And I can just, having been Asna for one of your winters, there's certain types of cars I would never want to be driving in Asna. And so my point when you talk about those 4 types of PBL is those 4 types of PBLs are the exterior of what those cars can look like. The interior of those 4 areas you talked about is going to be the 6 elements we're going to talk about tomorrow, as well as an attention to detail about what we just described about what PBL is. That if we spend attention to detail on these areas, if we ensure that all of these are addressed and present in whichever those 4 areas you talked about, then you're in a good place. But I've seen like place-based learning where there really wasn't student voice. It was just, there was curriculum there. There was a little content, but it was mostly front-loaded, which that's not what PBL is all about. So you mentioned the literature. Just keep in mind that it's what it sounds like. I'd have to see which one that person is referencing. But that's just the exterior. That's not the inside. This is the inside. If you follow, and that's why I want to show you. These 5 days are about what's the insight. If you use what I'm showing you as the engine and the internal system, you can apply this to any type of PBL approach you want to use and know that it's going to be a main course and not dessert. Now, once you're all done with that and you got this product, let's say it's a video or a presentation you're going to do to an audience. Okay. And you look at that and you say, well, you know what? That's perfect for our audience, and it assesses some of our curriculum, but doesn't assess all of our core curriculum. Can I also have a traditional assessment paired with that final presentation or video? The answer is yes, you absolutely can. You can use any traditional assessment you used in the past. We just want, where appropriate, we want to pair that with an authentic product for your target audience. Now, for some people, I might have thrown a lot at you at this point, but like I said, that's what we're going to tackle the next 4 days.